there were very, very few things surrounding machine translation when I first started looking at it. So I was like, oh, it would be great if we could write something that could automatically translate games from like Japanese to English or English to Japanese translation service. Pretty cool. So we started going down that route. And then I ran into Christian. And, Christian and his research group were doing a lot of things with data. We were doing things like semi-structured data. How do you search? How do you wrap web forms? And things like that. It wasn't exactly in the area that I was interested in, but I saw a lot of parallels. So I, decided I would jump in and understand what was going on. And, turned from a simple project trying to understand how things went to, wow, I really love all this stuff that I'm doing. I think I want to continue moving forward. So I went from never having a computer for most of high school to now applying for a master's degree, specializing in machine learning, natural language processing, things like that. Came out of it with 2 papers. I didn't get my PhD. It's one of those things that I'll probably do a lot later in life. But I really wanted to explore the application side of things. So I got my first job at IBM, and I was essentially a sales architect because I wanted to figure out there were 2 things that I knew that I had a lot of problems with at the time. I had a lot of problems conveying what it was that I was doing to people so it was easy to understand, and I had a problem with presenting to people and actually selling myself. So rather than with most people, what they end up doing is they start on a track and all they see is what's in front of them, like, oh, I'm going full steam ahead, data science or computer, software engineering, whatever. And me, I wanted to fix some things about myself before I came back in. So I went sales. I learned a lot of things that I wasn't very good at. I was really bad at talking to people. I don't think I'd be able to talk to you people if I hadn't gone through and done all that stuff, or have a camera right there. Hi, fourth wall. Through all of that, I learned a lot about myself, and I realized that after a while, I was able to convey things. I went from, and I'm sure the schooling or whatever it is that you're going through, you've experienced this, where you're working on something really awesome, and let's say deep learning nets, right? And you want to be able to explain that to all your friends, and you go and you talk, and 1 minute turns into 10 minutes, and they have no idea what it is that you're talking about. And it happens all the time, right? And I learned that you can't always do that, right? Especially if you go into industry. Right? Because a lot of times you're going to be selling your ideas to people if you can't convey them appropriately. You have issues. When I finally got enough from that, I was like, I'm going to become a data engineer, right? Because I always loved data, whether it was machine learning or whether it was just making sense and building tools around it. So I joined a Japanese game company called Gree. They have an office here in San Francisco. I worked on all things. I built out whether it's API endpoints for a lot of the teams of data science and statistical tools that the other teams needed. I built out a lot of that stuff. I did a lot of analysis on a lot of the game data that we had. So we did sentiment analysis on game chats. We did confidence tests for the data that we were ingesting from the games or from services that were around certifying those games. And we built out a lot of tools, figured out how to scale those things onto cloud environments, right? So I ended up getting the gamut from, cool, I can build this, amazing sentiment analysis tool to, hey, I can actually build out the infrastructure that hosts a lot of this stuff. And from there, I got a lot of knowledge, got a lot of experience, and I had the wonderful chance of mentoring somebody who now works at the company that I'm at now, which is back at IBM. And I do a lot of the same stuff, but I do it in an advisory role. So how do we help our company reach out to game studios and and other game related companies to build out tools, whether it's data related or platform related, so that they can grow as a company. And I don't know what comes next, but that is what it is. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me to start off. Don't be shy.
I can ask a question. So you told us that you were very interested in art at the beginning of when you had to make the decision of what to study. So you end up in computer science. So did you miss your artistic part of?
So it's actually a really good question. I miss it every day, but the funny thing is that to me, language, data science, programming, they're all forms of art, really, right? So the problem for me wasn't that I was never able to do art again. The problem was, how do I turn my new medium into my artistic canvas, right? Okay. So because I learned languages growing up, because I did art growing up, computer science, like programming to me it never felt mathematic. Even though it was mathematic, it felt more artistic, right? Like, how do I express what it is that I'm trying to convey? Like, Python is my #1 language. I can express putting something into a list and having it generate some object in so many different ways, but each way has its costs. Each way has a certain thing that you're trying to convey in the overall program. I don't know if that makes much sense, but that's how I view a lot of this stuff. So when I build systems, it's art. There's purpose involved and constraints, but even if I was an artist at Zynga, or if I was an artist, on my own off somewhere, I still have to follow the constraints of the universe that is the canvas, right? And so in computer science and data science, it's no different, right? You work with the data in order to create something wonderful.
So how did you choose your first job to do? What do you consider when you pick a job?
When picking your job, so there are two things, right? A lot of people will tell you, well, I don't know if a lot of people tell you. This is from my experience. From my experience, I had two routes that I had in front of me. When I was originally looking, I was offered either work at the IBM Watson division at the time, so building a lot of the tools, actually processing, whatever, or going the sales engineering route. It's kind of weird because I don't think too many people at the time would have chosen the sales engineering route at all. But at the time, I think I remember reading some article, and I don't remember if it was Marissa Meyer or somebody else who made a comment like, if you're not, something along the lines of choose something, sometimes you should choose that which is most difficult for you so you can grow, because you may not get that opportunity again, right? For me, data science, maybe this is me having a lot of bravado, or at least having confidence in myself, but those data science jobs were always going to be there for me because I had the foundation, and it's not that hard to pick up for me because my schooling, my learning was all there. It's kind of like riding a bike. I haven't ridden a bike in 5 to 10 years, and I decided I was going to ride a bike again. I might fall a couple times, right? But as long as I remember the mechanics, getting back on the bike and riding again is something that I know I can do. And so for me, I didn't want to stay away from data science for too long, which is why I gave myself 2 years. But it was all a matter of, let's see what I can't do, right? Because I know what I can do, right? Can I learn to make my weaknesses stronger? And then from there, how can I use that for my next job? And that's kind of how I went about it, right? Because at the end of the day, I had so many problems with presenting. I had so many problems with talking to people that in many ways, my career would have been stunted as a result, because as you get further and further, especially in data science or computer engineering or whatever, you're going to need to present your ideas. And it's not always going to be to a body of your peers, right? So how do you learn to convey your ideas in a way that makes people that aren't data scientists, who aren't computer engineers, understand you and see your vision so that then they can help you bring it to life, right? Whether it's a VC, whether it's a manager, whether it's the director of your department. I'm not super data sciencey, I guess, in that regard. I can't go into those levels of detail, but at least that's kind of what I saw. And to me, it's two sides, right? So I'm sure if you talk to another mentor, they're going to give you the more deeper piece, but this is just kind of like how I viewed my experiences. I guess I can ask you questions. Sorry, it looks like I'm looking at a paper, but they gave me this paper, so. Easy, I guess. What do you find exciting about data science?
You're generating like, today we are generating lots of data every moment. So getting to work with it and trying to find patterns and trying to find interesting things, that's the most exciting.
Yeah? How about you guys?
So on my side, I think it's something like you already told. When I was in high school, I liked art a lot, but at the end I end up doing computer science, and data science to me it's like doing computer science, but at the same time you tackle different problems that can be related to anything reality. So it's the opportunity to work in different fields and get exciting knowledge about different domains.
Yeah.
That's.
And you?
Just think about getting some knowledge or patterns or even the truths from this massive data. It's exciting. It's not depends on anyone's opinion, but the data speaks for themselves. So
Yeah.
I think that's exciting.
I mean, those were the things that I saw when I was in my classes. So those classes are kind of back. It's funny because he gave the presentation and started going to deep nets, and I can't say I wasn't overwhelmed because I was, but it was primarily because it was all things that I had seen like a few years ago, and it's like if you were dropped back in the middle of like neural nets class.
Yeah, I felt the same.
I was like, yeah, that's right, back propagation.
Yeah.
So going back in time.
Yeah. I mean, it's all pretty cool stuff, right? What do you guys struggle with?
You mean
Within
in the grad school?
graduate school or learning data science or?
First thing is finding good data sets. Yeah, that's the
I
biggest
think
struggle.
everybody has that problem.
That's the biggest struggle. And then, since a lot of people are working on this field, like finding something new that you can publish, it's really hard.
Yeah, we had there was a saying that somewhere crept into our area. So I was trying to do natural language processing research at the time, and somebody told me that whatever you think that you can do as a research topic, natural language processing, Microsoft have 10 papers in the pipeline if they haven't published on it.
And
So,
you think, I got this great idea, and you look up, and someone has already done it every single time.
what I wanted to do at the time was one of the things I wanted to work on. So natural language processing, when I was in grad school, it was extremely English-centric. Extremely English-centric. So like most of the papers that I would see were, applying natural language processing to English. So how do you detect, islands of speech? How do you deal with semi-complete sentences, Twitter analysis, what have you? Using Viterbi algorithm to do part of speech tagging, and all of those stuff. So there was a bunch of stuff on there, but I always wanted to do machine translation at the time, and I was like, there's nothing on like machine translation at all for like English to Japanese, or any of those things. So I started like looking around, like, oh, I'm gonna build out a part of speech tagger to do like part of speech tagging for Japanese or whatever. And I think I got halfway through writing my part of speech tagger, and I stumble on Chasen, which is like a Japanese natural language processing toolkit written in C, and I'm just like, oh,
It's done.
throw it out. I'm done. No more. And you find these things in the most remote areas.
That's
you may
true.
go a year working on something, and then,
Something pops up.
but you know what? You should never throw those things away.
Yeah.
So, because you never know when you're going to use it again. I just bookmarked it and said, okay, that's cool. I'm gonna keep going. So that was always one of my biggest problems. That and making sure that I didn't introduce bias in my own tests was always an issue too. So that and actually learning the math it was very difficult as well. But that is what it is. I mean, when I was in class, I think that one of my favorite classes was actually the intro to machine learning. Because one of the best projects that I probably ever had was we built a music recommendation system. Everybody would upload MP3s to a central database, and then you would introduce tags, right? And we had no stipulation as to features that we were supposed to find, no stipulation on number of dimensions or what algorithms that we would make and stuff. And I think that was my true introduction, right? We created our own features, we extended features, we threw out features, and it was a competition. So every week you had to upload a new model and run the model, and you get points associated with it. And the team that got an A was the team that had the best model.
So it was a strong incentive to work.
Yes, it was extremely strong incentive to work, right? And it was funny because we would introduce all these new tags, so people would get these like files, and they're like, I have no idea what to do with all these tags. Two teams are writing all these new features, and we can't even utilize them. So people have to go back to the drawing board and put stuff together and then rerun their models. And at the end of the day, he came out and said, well, you guys should all realize that the models that you're building are going to be dependent on a lot of stuff that you see, right? You're introducing your own biases when you're building a lot of these things. So in order to say who's the best algorithm, really the question is, what problem are you trying to solve? So it was a really good introduction to machine learning. I don't know if you guys had any classes or projects that did a similar thing.
So on my side, I think the first project that I really, it was a lot of work, but I really enjoyed it, was implementing convolutional neural networks. So at the beginning, I started with no knowledge at all, and all that to me now, after the presentation of Omar, it made a lot of sense. But at the beginning was a lot of disconnected pieces. So it was the first semester of my master's. So it was like all fitted together at the end, but at the beginning was very disconnected pieces.
I could imagine. How about you?
I found it difficult to find a job.
That's true.
In what sense?
Because I'm graduating and I'm trying to find a job. And, I haven't got any positive result yet. I think it's very difficult.
Yeah. I think it depends on what it is that you're exactly looking for. Right? I mean, I can't say that it was super, super difficult on my end because when it was years ago, and a lot of the talk of machine learning was like, everybody had to have their own Hadoop cluster to perform statistical modeling on every bit of information. Everybody needed a fire hose of Twitter that they needed to run natural language processing, let alone don't worry that they don't have any text analytics as part of their core competency for their career. But I think if data science is what you're looking for, I guess now it's probably going to be, I don't know if it's logic, because I currently am not looking for a data science job, but I could see how with a lot of people now entering the field, doing a lot of, data science research, a lot of data science teams have been established and working on things for years, how it could be a little bit more challenging. At least for me, when I took my first job, it wasn't data science. So I don't necessarily know if that's something that you even remotely consider, but there are a lot of applications to data science to other areas that a lot of teams end up looking at, right? So if I look from like platform engineering, knowing when to scale out a new server or a new node, right, requires a lot of data about the hardware, data about the workloads that are running. If you're doing it in a containerized environment, figuring out for each container, what's the percent CPU or RAM they're utilizing? How many connections do you currently have? How loaded is your, how many connections to that load balancer going through to that particular thing? What number of errors? What type of errors? Things like that, orchestration and scheduling. A lot of times require a lot of understanding of data in order to do it really well. That's just one area. Or you can go games, right? Like knowing when to spawn a new object in this particular area based off of number of users fighting this monster or stuff like that. A lot of times there are a lot of problems that can be solved utilizing data science. So it really depends on how broad you're willing to go in some regards. And sometimes it's how narrow you're willing to go, right? Maybe you need to specialize in this exact piece of, the practice. You get a lot of eyes. So following trends and things like that.
So I have a question. So when you got to decide if you want to be a very specialized professional or a kind of know a lot of things professional, do you have any suggestion for that? It's better to get more specialized, or it's better to have a broad knowledge of many things?
So I went broad because I felt like I had gaps. So like I said, I had issues in my first job where I knew that there were problems that I needed to fix about myself, in order to figure out how to talk to people and, convey what it was that I wanted to build, what I wanted to make, to other people. I like being broad in my knowledge, so I like having the tools to know how to solve a particular problem. Part of that might just be how I view things as artistic. I like to figure out ways to put pieces together, and I like to build things. But I didn't feel like there was an area for me that I wanted in data science that I wanted to corner the market in. For me, it was all about what I did with it. So I love video games, right? So I decided that whatever it was that I was going to do, I would like to specialize in video games. So that's kind of where I went about it. You can specialize in an area of profession, or you can specialize in an industry, right?
Okay.
Or there are people who will specialize in tools, but I think you can specialize in tools while doing the other things as well. So I guess some of it will require some self-reflection.
Yeah, of course. I just was asking for your experience. So.
For me, I wanted to be broad. I didn't think there was an area that I wanted to zoom in on. Once upon a time there was, I wanted to do machine translation, but that I can't manage those waves that fast. It's like every week something new comes out. All right, like the Microsoft thing came out like a few years ago, and at that point I was like, oh, what do I need to do here? I'm clearly not even here anymore. Right? So I don't know. That's kind of how I do it. Go back to the nice, wonderful paper. So, oh, I should go here. I mean, I guess I could. I feel like contextually speaking, it'd be weird to ask, but you kind of already given me that. How do you guys see yourself in 5 years?
Okay. You picked the tough question.
Hey,
I hope I can finish my PhD
I hope you can finish your PhD too.
in 5 years. Because I'm already in my third year. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I struggle between joining academia and industry because before coming, so I'm originally from Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked as a junior professor before coming here in university. So I really like teaching there. But in here, I feel like joining academia is extremely difficult. You need to be perfect basically. So I don't know whether I want to join industry or join academia. I'm still trying to decide what I want to do.
If Christian were here, I'd ask him. He was in here for a little bit, and he like did
What's
it.
there right now?
He's not there anymore, but that's fine. But it's definitely a tough one. I wrestled with that one for a little bit, but I like building things, and I'm not the best writer for grants. Right?
Yeah, that's something I worry about.
So, yeah, that's definitely a tough one. But have you done any internships, like
I'm
at
doing
companies?
yeah,
You're
yeah.
doing one right now?
That makes me like that. Okay, so I feel like when you go to industry, a lot depends on your manager, like who you work with. If your manager is not a person that you can work easily, like there's no way to get out of it. So that's one thing I appreciate about academia because you're independent. So yeah, that's I don't know. I'm really torn about between these two after doing internship as well.
Yeah. Do you have you're torn, but are you leaning towards one right now or the other?
So I love teaching. That's something I love to do, but I'm not sure whether I appreciate writing grants and doing all those kind of stuff while I'm in the academia.
Mm-hmm.
And in the industry, I like solving real world problems because you get to work with real world data and solve real world problems. That's very interesting. But I feel like industry depends a lot on people that you work with. So I sometimes that worries me because like if you get to work with a bad manager, there's no way to get out of it. So
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say there's no way to get out of it, right? I mean, I'm in industry in some way or another, and in many ways you can always look for another
job.
department or job. Right?
But in industry, you'll have more freedom.
Really? I always thought you are
Than an
stuck with the
academy.
manager that you get.
Well, at the end of the day, the moment the grant is given, that's your track for the most part until the grant is up, right? So when you're working academia, there's definitely a long con that you need to like pay attention to,
That's true.
right? So you're more free in choosing the road. Just know that the road goes on for a while. It's kind of like a PhD. It's kind of like you're doing a PhD every so often, right? The moment you've got your topic and the moment you know for your dissertation or your thesis, that's your long con, right? That's your next 3, 4, 5, God forbid, 6, 7, 8 years,
You
right?
never know.
You never know. So, and you live and die by the grant in many ways. A lot of times when I was working on problems that were related to data science in industry, you get assigned a project and you'll work on it maybe for, if it's a long-standing project, you'll work on it until upper management or whoever or your manager says, things have changed, we're going to work on this thing instead. So you don't necessarily steer the ship as often, but you get to experience a lot of different things depending on the needs of the organization. And there's nothing to say that you can't do industry research. I mean, there's still kind of a long con in industry research, but you're not necessarily tied by the grant.
Yeah.
You're not tied by the people that are working on your project or what have you, right? So there's different freedoms, right?
So it was interesting because I always thought that academia gets you more freedom than industry, but like with what you told, it's like I need to rethink that. It's really interesting.
And I mean, don't take what I'm saying for gold now. I mean, I wanted to do a PhD. I didn't do my PhD yet, but I mean, it's a lot of
it's another dimension,
exactly,
right? So never thought about it at that dimension. So it's nice to be.
So, and again, maybe you don't do. I know this is a data science conference. Maybe you don't do data science, but you utilize a lot of those same principles in what it is that you do, right? A lot of times there are a lot of teams in different, areas of the field where everybody thinks of, let's say everybody thinks of container orchestration from an IT DevOps perspective, right? You bring the fresh mindset from data science to say, hey, there are a bunch of features that your computers, your processes are all telling you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everything's a sensor, right? And I don't know if you guys have done anything with IoT data for data science, but a log coming out of a process is no different than just sensors giving out like temperature or touch to this degree, right? So, and a lot of times, a lot of people in those areas don't think that, and you introduce new ways of solving problems based off of the same core principles. And sometimes that turns into a paper, sometimes that turns into speaking at conferences, right? And you may find that that's what you want to do, and if that's not what you want to do, then you can always find another job.
It's not like the end of the world.
I always try. I always try to be flexible.
Yeah.
So just to round up, in your experience, how was it like dealing with people in industry?
Yeah.
It was a nice experience, or did you learn some ways to better relate to them? Or
So, yeah, industry was very different from me. Right? I was in school for a total of 7 years. I did 3 internships. I did one at a web authoring place near Gainesville, Florida. I did one at a defense contractor. We worked on mine detection in underwater and whatnot. And then I did Extreme Blue internship at IBM. So I learned a lot of how to present, how to build an idea from the ground up. It's a startup. For 3 months, you go from concept to product, right? Those are all bubbles, right? When I first got into my first job, and I had to really interact with industry, you quickly go from, hey, I can talk to you all day about Bitterbeat. I can talk to you all day about part of speech tagging and why you need it in your sprocket or whatever. Just throwing random words around. But it was a real change because you went from working on things and learning things just so that you had better knowledge to solve your problem to it's my problem, but it's not just my problem. And I think for me that was the biggest change, right? A lot of what I was doing wasn't just for me. There was a lot of other areas that were dependent on what it was that I was doing. There were a lot of different areas that had their own viewpoints, right? And again, a lot of stuff I had to figure out and fix and learn was how do I communicate what I'm trying to do to help them? How do I take the criticism? How do I, see their side of it and know that they want to do it a different way, but not berate them? Or, how do I tell somebody? The hardest one for me by far was how to tell somebody they're wrong. That by far was the hardest thing for me to do, right? I'm very direct and a lot of times, so especially this was really hard because when I was in my first job, I'd have to tell somebody they were wrong in front of a customer, right? You say it, if you tell somebody they're wrong in the wrong way, the whole company that you represent loses credibility, right? And so it's how do you dance the dance of still making sure that you tell people, hey, no, that's not necessarily what it is that we're talking about here. You do something else. And I've been on calls where people pretend to know, about data science, or they pretend to know about building games or whatever, or building services. And the client's on the line. And what it is that they're saying is so far off base, you can hear the client sigh in like, oh, what is he talking about? And how do you jump in and save the conversation without losing face as a group, right? It's very difficult for me. Algorithms I can always learn, right? I can always learn how to write programs. I can take criticism when, I go through our code reviews or whatever. I can always, I have no problem telling somebody they're wrong and they're right next to a desk and we're doing pair programming. Yeah, very cool. Telling somebody they're wrong and they're not in your department, or telling somebody they're wrong and they're your boss's 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 boss. Without losing your job.
Which is the major concern.
But I mean, at the end of the day, you can always find another job. Sometimes. There should be asterisks on everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that took a long while to answer, but I hope that was it. So, you've been relatively quiet.
Because it was before I came here, it was a long flight. It's from Australia, it's 15, 16 hours.
I've done that flight.
Yeah, I didn't sleep for, I think, the whole night. So that's why I was a little quiet.
That's okay.
Hi, fourth wall. I almost have the same question as her. So, I'm also struggling about doing pure research in a university or something, or in an industry lab, or be just a software engineer. So that's your question about how broad you are willing to be.
I mean, again, right, you're always going to, most people always end up compromising on something.
Yeah.
Right? If you're doing research, I mean, you're going to end up compromising on something anyway. Oh, the data isn't exactly what I'm trying to do. How do I solve this problem? Or I didn't get this grant. How do I go about? Or, maybe I didn't get to do data science, but how do I? And I always ask those questions. Right? I always ask, how do I do this when I can't do A, B, C, or D? Right? I mean, as my current role, I mean, I'm an advisory software engineer. So what that means is that I'm a software engineer, of course, but I advise people on what it is that would help them for their environment, for their data set, for their game, right? And that's a lot of compromise that I always have to deal with. Cool. You're doing a bunch of data processing, but you're using Hadoop on this. Okay. So now I have to go from what I would envision would be the perfect tool, because everybody loves Greenfield, right? Greenfield, oh, there's nothing there. I get to build everything from the ground up. It is mine from the bottom up, but you never end up that way, right? So you always end up having to compromise in some way or regard. It's what level do you want to compromise on?
Yeah, because in the future, it's 5 years, you don't know which direction is going to be like pitch. So it's hard to do.
Technology in 5 years, it's going to make a bit different from now.
And I mean, it's not just technology too, right? There's politics involved with a lot of things.
That's true.
Right? Like, hell, 5-10 years ago, so I'll use my brother as an example. He's an electrical engineer. Right? It wasn't that long ago that as an electrical engineer, it wasn't that hard to find a job. And sequestration happened, or some bunch of stuff that happened politically, and all of a sudden, all the defense contracting companies were like, we're not hiring electrical engineers. And nobody realized that they were the majority of the people hiring electrical engineers. And the demand for my electrical engineering went from this to this. Or pharmacy. My wife's a pharmacist. Wasn't that long ago that a pharmacy job was an easy street ticket, right? All the pharmacies were giving sign-on bonuses. Some of the ones were giving you a new car so you could drive to the pharmacy to do work. And in a blink of an eye, pharmacy went from this demand to this demand, right? No more signing bonuses. For every pharmacy position opening, there were about 500 people. I think the state of Florida alone graduates 3,000 pharmacists a year, right? So you can imagine the pharmacy glut there, right? I mean, you're always going to have 5 years from now, hell, the politics might change, and we may have the new COPPA or the new HIPAA, where it's like internet data is no longer, scrapable or consumable by APIs. What now?
Yeah.
Right? So you never know, right? I'd like to think that I was blessed or lucky or whatever you want to call it that I stumbled into this field when I did, but I have no prior on knowing that this will stay forever, right? So never know. That's why I kind of think 5 years from now is kind of a long time, because if you think 5 years was the difference from having a flip phone, what was it, the Motorola Razr, and having the iPhone, right? Was the difference from having my calendar on my watch, having my calendar on my phone, right? So.
Hey guys, we'll wrap up in 10 minutes.
Cool. I hope you guys liked it. I'm not here talking about algorithms or whatnot. I try. Oh, 10 minutes? Oh, don't worry about this.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you're in industry, you're surrounded by a bunch of very smart people. So everyone tries to criticize everything you do. So how do you learn to accept criticism?
So I never. This might sound kind of contradictory to what I said before when I said how do you tell somebody when they're wrong? Mm-hmm. At the same time, I never assume that I'm right all the time. Right? you always want to take criticism well, depending on what the type of criticism it is.
Yeah, but there are some people, especially PhDs, they think they know everything when they talk. So I think it's really hard to accept criticism from that kind of a person because they're trying to criticize everything you do. So I'm not sure how to handle that kind of situation. especially from someone who thinks he knows everything, like he talks about.
At the end of the day, and the answer I'll give you is probably going to be like a half-assed answer.
Okay.
No, but it's a great point though, right? Like accepting criticism in the industry is something that you're going to have to do, right? I can't imagine anybody never having to take criticism in any scientific field. Yeah. Otherwise, it wouldn't be really scientific.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So sometimes you just nod and smile. There are times where there are fights that are worth fighting, and there are fights that are not worth fighting, right? So if it's somebody giving you flack because your constant is off by 2 decimal points or whatever, that's not a fight I really care about winning. And sometimes you nod or you say, okay, cool, whatever. If it's abuse, then you report it, right? Because there are very toxic places in the industry, and sometimes it's abuse. And sometimes you need to report because there is a proper way to criticize someone, right? And if it's every single little thing, I don't want to get all conspiracy or whatever, but sometimes the question maybe not so much be about the content, but the person delivering the content, right? Maybe they're trying to criticize you and not so much the stuff that you're doing. So you should always be cognizant of it, but I also go innocent until proven guilty. So until I detect a trend, maybe you want to write a tool that helps you detect this, right? Well, there are a lot of places. I think Riot has a bully detection algorithm they're working on. I went to there for a data science conference thing, but if it's criticism, constructive criticism, then I always try to see where they're coming from and see if it's something worth fighting about. If it's not constructive and it seems like it's nitpicking on every single little thing, then see if there's a trend. And if it's a trend, then are you being bullied or harassed? Is it about is it about me, or is it about my work? And sometimes people are like that. Sometimes they're just trying to be the better person, and it can come to the point of harassment. And then you go and you find your manager and you have a wonderful conversation, right? Whenever I try to find a company to work for, I always try to figure out what they're working on and how they work on it, right? And then from there, culturally, I want to know how it operates. Because if a company is doing cool stuff, but I don't fit the culture, and it's really hard, right? Because I can get all underrepresented and stuff about it, but for a long time I was the only one in my team, or the only one in the engineering department, or one of the only ones in the research department team. And everybody comes in with preconceived set of notions and mindset on how they're supposed to approach somebody. And you always have to figure out a way to battle, but know when to battle and when not to battle. And so culturally, it's very important to see how people interact with one another. I don't necessarily, this is going to sound really weird, it doesn't matter to me who is on my team, right? If I'm the only black dude in my team, it matters more to me that I can work well with the rest of my team, regardless of whatever preconceived notions that everybody has about one another, than for me to be in a diverse team where everybody's fighting and arguing and can't get anything done, right? So like culture fit's definitely like a big thing for me, right? So when I go into interview, I always ask like, what are your hours like? What is it like when you do code review? What is it like when you give presentations? You know, how do you interact with your team? How close are you guys? What happens during conflict? How do you deal with somebody? You know, I had this happen to me a couple of times. How do you deal with somebody taking advantage of you for on call when they're not doing their job? So I don't know if you know anything about on call, but you know, at least if you're on like an operations team or an engineering team, services, you know, every once in a while you have a 24-hour shift, depending on how your company does it. 24-hour shift where if there's a problem, it goes to you and you try to fix it. So how do you deal with people taking advantage of you to take care of those things? So that was one of the big ones for me. But you should always weigh what it is that you're getting, you know, conflict from. That seems like word salad. Hopefully you guys understood that. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, that answers.
Okay, cool. How are we for time? It's 12, well, my watch says 12:03, it's 11:58. Any last questions from you guys? Yay, nay, no? If not, cool. I think we can wrap it up. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully it was useful. If not, I'm sorry. It is what it is. Take care. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much for your time.